Kirsten, it's 6
Yep.
o'clock.
Yep, I got it. I was just getting all the things started in the recording. So good afternoon, evening, everyone. Welcome to our Confidence Builders tonight. We are going to be looking at sheltering during COVID-19. So I am going to turn off everyone's microphones right now just so that we are good to go. We have some background noise there going, so just kind of a reminder about that. During the presentation tonight, you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions at the end or in the chat, but we're going to kind of group questions together because we have 1 hour right now to go through and just kind of get some highlights and some tips and tools for working in a sheltering situation during COVID-19. So Chuck Duncan is here as our host. Thanks, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to be with many of you again. We enjoyed all of this good learning opportunities that we've been given these last few weeks, and appreciate Kirsten and her team putting it together. So we don't want to take long on the introductions tonight, but we're just going to head and get started because we have a full hour of presentations and hopefully have a time at the end for questions. Like Kirsten said, please hold the questions. We got 2 parts. We'll go at the end of part 1 and see if we got any questions that we can answer at that time. But there is another presentation immediately after this one at 7 o'clock. So we'll have to press on through on that. Tonight, I've asked a team from San Diego chapter in Southern California region to do a presentation on what fire they had that required a large evacuation in Neyland, California. So I've asked Sherry Curtis if she would kind of lead this. Sherry, it's yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you very much for monitoring our chat this evening. I'm going to launch into this very quickly because we have so much that we want to share with you. So here's a quick picture of what the fire looked like in Neyland. We had over 500 people evacuated, and just keeping in mind that the town of Neyland is not much larger than that. So just for orientation, here's the state of California with Neyland at the very bottom, with Imperial County. And this is a blow up of Imperial County, if you can see that.
Sherry, you need to, your slide's not advancing.
Okay, let me unshare and start again then.
Okay, no problem.
You're okay. If you just hit the, you're good. You just had to hit the presenter and it would have popped in. There you go.
There you go.
All right, good. So everybody can orient. Here is El Centro, and Neyland is way up here above it. Okay, so over 500 or 600 people were evacuated. Okay, did everybody see that advance? Is it working now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So here was our service delivery for the event. Over almost 400 overnight hotel stays and 118 rooms. Sharon will go into the feeding as she gets later. And you can see a shot of what the town of Neyland looked like after the fire burned through. All right, so I have 4 people lined up who are going to be talking about the functions that they performed during this event. So I'm going to turn the floor over right now to Melody Armendariz, who is in our Imperial County Red Cross, and she was there running the TEP for us.
Yes, this was a huge learning experience for us because we had not even had an exercise on this as of that night. But how we started, we just, a few clients got there before us, but once we got there with the TEP trailer, we just went to each vehicle and started gathering information. I just had a sheet and I was just writing down the contact name, the pre-disaster address, their phone number, how many was in their group, and if there was any special needs. And we did the chalk on the marking of the parking spaces to number them, so I could correlate that with the number on the paper, so I knew, like, if number 9 needed something, I could mark it on there and I could go right back to them. So that helped a lot. And then as I filled up one page, I would just take a picture. I don't know if this is the best practice, but that's what we did. I would take a picture of that page and I would text it to the sheltering manager, and then they would start on the hotel reservations with that page. And each time, then I would go back and get another page full, and then I would take a picture and send it to them. It seemed to work well that way. And then we had other people also coming behind me pretty much, and offering snacks and water to the clients. We had a lot of people in the community ended up bringing cases of water. And then it did get cold because it started about 7 at night and it went through, we left about 6 the next morning. So we had blankets out of the TEP trailer, so we were offering those to the clients. And we also did have some transportation problems for some of the clients, so we had to coordinate transportation for them to the hotels. Some of them was the police department, and then we also had our county helped us a lot with doing some of that also. They would give them rides. Let's see, if there's something below that, I can't read it.
That was your COVID positive patients.
Oh, yeah. We did have one client say, as soon as we walked up to the window, we didn't even have to ask. They barely cracked the window and let us know that they were COVID positive. So at one point we did have a health department person was on scene. She didn't stay very long, but she did tell us who to contact with the county, and we were able to get them to some trailers that our county has that is for COVID positive who are self-quarantining and don't have a place to stay. So we were able to direct them there instead of to our hotel. And okay, then next slide. So a few things we learned. We need to make sure we have enough staff. We are very small in our area, so it was a little more difficult because we also had canteening going on at the same time. And then we had one pulled away to be a government liaison at the scene of the fire, or at the, scene of the fire. So just one thing we should have done that we learned is, and I know the training has it, but we need to have somebody at that entrance and exit of the TEP. When clients would leave, we had so few workers, we didn't know that they left or if they were coming back. We didn't know if they had got their hotel room. So we sort of lost track right there. So that was a huge lesson learned. Luckily, we had people from the school where we were at. They were assisting with handing out items to the clients. And then on the gathering of the demographics, we were just told to get the number in the party, but lesson learned, we need to get the ages of at least the minors, because it makes a big difference in hotel rooms and how many rooms they'll need. And also later on in the feeding, it's much difference, a 2-year-old versus a 17-year-old. We did this, but it was a little difficult at the beginning to prioritize the hotel rooms. We had quite a few that had health issues and needed outlets for like oxygen and different machines. So it's very important to prioritize those that need to get in the hotel room sooner. Lighting is a little difficult. I was trying to hold my paper and hold my phone so I could see. And so we had come up with maybe those headlamps would be good for registration, so we would have our hands free for lighting and writing notes. And also even reflective vests, if we could have those maybe in the TEP trailers. I don't think we have those in ours. But that would help because we were in a school parking lot, but lighting was still an issue since it was during the night. And just something to think about, we had bilingual staff, but that would be very important to make sure you had somebody there that was bilingual, just in case you have that language barrier. And those are our main lessons we learned for the TEP. We did learn a lot. And that's all I have for the TEP.
Thank you, Melody. So the next person that will be taking over is Becky, who was our client lodging coordinator for the beginning of this event.
Hello, everybody. I'm Becky Carbett. I was the virtual lodging coordinator, at least for the first 48 hours of evolution. So as far as the coordination of lodging for the first
like
24
literally
hours.
jumping.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Becky, I can hear you. Somebody else
I
has
hear
their
background noise, so I didn't know if there was
so
an
do
issue.
I.
Okay, I'll
We
keep
can
going.
hear you.
I can hear you.
So for the first 24 hours, the main thing that we did was first we contacted the local hotels to determine the number of rooms available, the types of room available, the occupancy limits, the accessibility, the pet policy, the smoking policy, and their ability to take the credit card over the phone. So since in Brawley there was 5 different hotels to choose from, we picked the one obviously that had the most rooms available due to the amount of clients that we were dealing with. In Calipatria, there was only one hotel we could deal with, so that kind of narrowed that down for us. So once we got that determined as to what hotels we were going to be using, we started to match the clients to the appropriate rooms. So the names were coming into me, and I was trying to match them as quickly as possible. So first thing I did was reach out to the clients to verify. I did have family size, but I wanted to make sure and distinguish how many children, how many adults, because that affected the amount of rooms that they would need. So I contacted the client first, then contacted the hotel, make sure they had a room reservation, and then I contacted the client back to let them know that they had rooms. So that process took a little bit of time. So coordinating with the hotel, they were really great. I was calling them every couple of minutes. So I'm thankful that they were working with us pretty well. So most of the clients, all of them knew, the ones that had rooms, let them know that they were good to go. They all confirmed that they still needed the rooms. And then the next tab is establish close communication with the hotel front desk. Like I mentioned, we were on like a first name basis. I gained a few friends. And then I also work with them to get the listing of all the clients' hotel rooms so we could fill that in the non-congregate site client tracking tool. So next slide. After the first 24 hours, we were staying in contact with the hotel to determine the clients that had checked out. Some of them did not officially check out with the front desk. So that was some of the things that we learned, which will be mentioned in the lessons learned. So trying to keep the most accurate client count that we could, because what we were putting in the non-congregate sheltering tool was being used by other people. And so we wanted to keep it as accurate as possible as far as who are the clients that are still in the hotel, etc. We coordinated the receipt of the hotel billing each day, assisted P-card holder with receipts required for reconciliation, function as liaison with virtual virtual lodging team, corporate lodging consultants after the first 72 hours, maintain non-congregate site client tracking tool to reflect active Red Cross clients, voucher clients, and clients who had checked out. And then entered the hotel charge information into the 5266. Next slide. So the lessons learned. So we learned that there needed to be a single point of contact to screen clients requesting access to American Red Cross lodging after the TAP closed. We had a lot of clients that would call me, since I was the one dealing with them initially, getting them the rooms, and they'd be like, they would mention, oh, my mom, my aunt, my cousin, this, that, and the other. And so I couldn't just get them rooms. They had to go through the process like everyone else. But after the TAP closed, there was some confusion about who they should directly call. There was unclear separation of roles for sheltering staff. So multiple people were kind of overlapping and doing similar things. So I know the front desk of the hotels were getting contacted by multiple people asking similar questions. So clarity in the roles as people were designated would be definitely beneficial. And then follow up with hotel clients to minimize no-show rates on the first night. So every client that I contacted and let them know that they had a room, they were like, okay. I was like, you still need the room? Yes. Even though they confirmed they still needed the rooms, there was at least 5 clients or families that did not show up on the first night. So that was an issue. We had rooms paid for with no clients in them. Also work with sheltering lead to establish protocol regarding clients who paid for their own hotel rooms and want American Red Cross to assume their charges. So this became an issue when, after 3-4 hours of waiting for a room, some people just decided to take it upon themselves to go ahead and go to these hotels and check in and pay for it themselves, and then asking for reimbursements later on. So that was another lesson learned. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Becky. And then now we're going to move on to David O'Neill, who was our shelter manager. He oversaw the site managers for this DR.
Hi, everybody. My name's David O'Neill. I was the shelter manager for the Nut Island fire. It shows here my responsibilities were to keep in contact with the shelter manager about the non-congregate shelters. I mentored the site coordinators, managers regarding responsibilities for each day on the DR. I also coordinated with the feeding and lodging and health services regarding clients' needs and food counts needed. I also coordinated the position of American Red Cross signs at the hotel sites, printed off the exchange signage tool under operations. I was able also to do some evals on the volunteer connection, which was something nice and new. FYI, if you do an evaluation and it gets approved and there needs to be a correction, you need to go through IT services so they can do a ticket, and they'll pass that information on to the volunteer connection personnel and they'll do the change. So that's kind of what the shelter manager. Now let's move on to the shelter site manager. The shelter site manager reported to the shelter manager, called each primary client for updates and information for clients who were planning on checking out, so we could let the front desk know so we were not charged for that day. This needed to be done before 11 o'clock in the morning. Site managers entered client information collected for the day and were added to the non-congregate site client tracking tool, which you'll see towards the end of this presentation. They worked with the hotel front desk staff to facilitate communications with the clients, especially the clients who would not answer their door when you knocked, or responded to their own personal phones when you called, or not answering their room phone also. So that was a tool that came really handy for us. Maintain client departure information to the non-congregate site tracking tool, and pass that information on to client lodging coordinator, especially clients that were transitioned to county vouchers. Next slide, please. And these are some of the lessons learned. The clients were checking out, a lot of people don't even go to the front desk when they check out anymore. And we had that problem. We coordinated feeding with logistics. We had some supplies that saved us a trip with DES. We asked feeding, since they were going up that way, if they would take comfort kits, and they did, and we gave them out to the clients at the hotels. We ensured roles. We talked about the roles being clear between staffing functions to avoid duplication of calling the front desk. Yes. And we ensured the communication with the recovery caseworkers to identify the clients who have converted their housing vouchers and are ready to exit the hotel. So that was an exciting position for me, and I was glad I was able to do it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, David. Great job. Okay, and so this is Sherry back again, and I was functioning on this DR as the sheltering manager. So these are some of the things that I did. Yeah, it looks more impressive than it really was. So I recruited the client lodging coordinator. I recruited the shelter manager, who was David. I took the information from the TEP, reviewed it, and clarified the information as needed, and then forwarded that on to the client lodging coordinator. I actually entered the client registration information into the non-congregate site client tracking tool because Becky was very busy trying to get the clients into rooms. I maintained close communication with all of the people that were involved especially in the sheltering team on this DR. I took over the transition from P-card to corporate lodging, which is required to be accomplished within the first 72 hours of the incident. I maintained the integrity of the non-congregate site client tracking tool, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a minute. We had, of course, our battle rhythm established and all of the timing and reports that were due. We used, it says 204 on here, but we actually used a 203, 215, 5266, the non-congregate shelter counts on Power Apps, which I'll also talk about. I completed the 6409s because even though these are non-congregate sites, we still had possession of them as facilities. So those needed to be open so that the person whose P card was being used on the operation could use that to reconcile their charges. And also new for us was completing this resource record form, the 6455, which is actually, we may know it as an in-kind donation form, but it is now being used also for non-congregate sites. And then, of course, at the end of the operation, I completed evaluations for the appropriate staff. So very quickly, and I know this is small and I don't know how to make it any bigger for you, but this is a snapshot of the non-congregate site tool that we have all been talking about. Okay, so what we did was entered the name of the person who's representing the household, their pre-disaster street address, the city, zip, county, and their telephone number, and the number of people in their room or in their group. Then Becky came back through and put in their assigned room numbers once that was completed. And this form goes way off to the right. You can't see the whole thing, but every day, the site managers would enter mass care notes because it was their job, as David said, to contact the clients every day, and they would make note of their conversations here in these columns. And then casework, health services, spiritual care, mental health, on and on. They all had their own sections in which to write on this form. And if you can get out your magnifying glasses at the bottom, you'll notice that this form has multiple pages within it. So each hotel site had their own sheet. So it was easy to tell, and we renamed those. So one of them said Calipatria, and the other one, instead of hotel worksheet, said Days in Brawley. So it was easy to tell, which site you were working on. Okay, I'll give your eyes a break here. And I wanted to introduce this tool because I think most of us who work in sheltering are not familiar with it. This is brand new. So as you know, when we're on an operation, normally our shelter counts are entered into NSS. However, that is not what happens with non-congregate sheltering. This is the tool that is used now to record the shelter counts. And it is an app that you can load onto your computer. It's called Power Apps. And what you want to look for is this non-congregate shelter counts form within that app. Okay, so here's how it works, right? You pull it up and you see this page, right? And if you're opening a brand new site, you want to click on this plus button here that says Add New. Okay, and these are the screens that you will see as you scroll through that, right? You'll put in the site name. You can put in a site type, which is a drop down, whether it's a hotel or a campground, etc. Number of rooms reserved, number of rooms occupied, number of clients. If you have other information on here, you can fill it out. If you have clients in isolation, you can put that, but it's not a required field. You definitely want to put in the site manager and the site manager phone number so that if necessary, someone else can contact them with questions. The funding type is also a drop down, and that will be typically either P-card or corporate lodging. I did not fill out any of the estimated daily rates because we were putting that in the 5266. Put the site address, the state, the zip code, and to finalize it, you click this little checkbox up here, and that submits it for the day. Okay, you only enter this once, and you can enter the numbers from 6 p.m. to 4 a.m., anytime between those time, and that is Eastern time. All right, so lessons learned. Ensure that there are adequate client lodging coordinator staff so that we can clear the TEP as quickly as possible. Ensure adequate staffing in all areas so that you can delegate. So you notice that I was doing some things that probably should not have been on my plate. Watch out for people trying to manipulate the non-congregate site client tracking tool if they do not have Excel skills. That was a job for a couple of us who had to go in there every day and clean that poor thing up, because boy, did it get messy. I would recommend that we establish daily meetings with recovery and casework from the outset between shelter and recovery so that we can message our clients with a consistent conversation in terms of their exit strategy. The virtual lodging team, just so you know, the virtual lodging team cannot be activated until the incident gets a DR number. So as I mentioned, you have 72 hours to convert off of P-card and onto corporate lodging. So if you do not have a DR, you want to work with corporate lodging directly. And we also need to establish a way to refer clients to health services, mental health, and disability integration without compromising their protected health information. So what we found was there was some private information that was written into the non-congregate shelter site tool. And, we're just going to have to figure that out as we go along. Okay, and that concludes the presentation for sheltering. I think we're running just about 5 minutes over. So Chuck, are there any burning questions that we want to answer?
Just a few, Sherry, real fast. One of them was the reimbursements because of people asking for reimbursements. How did you work for that? Those that paid for their own hotel rooms?
So we had to get the protocol and suggestions from our job director on this DR as to whether or not we were even going to do that. And in the end, we did, and just worked with the hotel so that they could transition those rooms onto the P card and off of the client's personal cards.
Okay, good. Did you have any problem with the hotels as far as putting signage up at the hotels?
David, correct me on this, but I believe we only had one sign that was requested that we post, and it was simply how to contact Red Cross if you had questions. I think it had the address for the LAC.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that we had any trouble with them in terms of posting that.
Okay. I think you just need to let everybody know there were some questions about CLC and how you work through CLC using a virtual lodging team. Just very
Okay.
briefly.
So if you would please, my email address is up here. I would love it if, I know we had to just scurry through all of this, and I know that there is a lot of detail that's missing. And if anyone wants more detail, please contact me. I will give you everything that I have and then some.
Yes, I know, folks, I know Sherry will definitely do that. If you ask her the question, she will get back with you. I know her very well. Okay, Sherry, let's go ahead if you want to and press on.
All right, we're done. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn this floor over to Sharon Swenningson, who is going to be talking about feeding on this event.
Oops, I hit the wrong button. I have to, I tried to, just give me 1 second. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, Sherry, we can.
Okay.
Sharon, we can see it.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the biggest challenges on day one. I found out about the fire probably, I heard about it at 7, and then I knew they were going to open up a tap, and there would probably be hotel rooms, but there really wasn't a lot I could do at that point because I didn't know what hotels, what cities they were going to be in. I did some preliminary Googling as to what restaurants might be available, because that area is Imperial County, and most of the volunteers were already working at the tap. And as we mentioned, Nyland is in a pretty remote area. It's about 2.5 hours away from San Diego and about an hour from our newly combined neighbor to the north, Coachella. I can't stress enough how important the restaurant vendor agreements are to get those in advance. And also the COVID packaging really makes it much more difficult than when we used to be able to just go to Costco, get things there. So it's much more difficult under COVID. And another challenge was also the accurate number of clients to place food orders. I think you will find that you may order excess food the first day because there is a lot of moving parts, and sometimes the count isn't that accurate, but it's better to have more food than less food. So what happened was I did get up at 3:30 in the morning. I started contacting Sherry and also the duty officer. We determined some volunteers that might be able to work in Imperial County, but we found out that they do have limited volunteers, and of the volunteers that did not work overnight, some just weren't available. So I quickly realized that we had to get a team in transit from San Diego to Imperial County so that we could service the group and serve lunch and dinner. So as all of you know, the meal requirements are much different. We have to package everything in individual containers. And when you do that, it's much more difficult to keep the food hot because you have all of that packaging around it. Many of the hotels that used to serve breakfast, if you go on their website, it may appear that they're still serving breakfast, but they're not. The other thing is that the hotels that we used, nobody could enter the lobby it was basically a window that the customers would go up to. And so there really weren't the services. We couldn't expect people in the hotel to deliver the meals. We had to deliver all of the food. So that's one thing that you really have to be prepared for as COVID increases, is that you definitely will probably have to have feet in the ground, because the hotels just don't have the staffing to do that. And our meal service method, as I think all of you know, is to place the meals, condiments, cutlery kits, snacks into a plastic t-shirt bag, knock on the door, step back, and then place the food down, step back, and have the clients pick it up. And we did serve a continental breakfast. This could be something like Nutri-Grain bars, Velveeta bars, juice cups, fresh bananas, little cutie oranges, that type of thing. And that worked out very well. And when you have limited feeding choices, you really need to be prepared to know what you can serve in a COVID environment. There was a lot of fast food. I had located some restaurants at 3:30 in the morning that I thought would be great, but they were closed on Monday and it didn't indicate that on their website. So I had to quickly just go to fast food. And like Sherry said, I have a lot of information and I can share that with those that are interested in it. But basically, everything has to be prepackaged. When you're looking at something like hamburgers, Jack in the Box comes in boxes. So those are easy to put into a Cambro and keep hot. However, something like In-N-Out Burger, where they usually package them with the hamburger showing, that does not work so well. So I had there was a lot of fast food, but not a lot of other choices in that area. So what went well? We had done a lot of training. And so we had developed, the big thing I was wondering about was how I was going to use that non-congregate site tool to figure out which rooms to deliver the food to. And I have some slides later on to show you what I did, because I didn't want to rely on the hotel because I wasn't sure what I was going to see. We had trained our staff. We had all the equipment available to do the in-person feeding. We understood the process to do remote 6409s. And I can't stress that enough. If you have a number of hotels open, you really have to have a system to keep all of your paperwork, your receipts together so that you can track all of your food purchases. And this is really important. You really need to have people with P cards, because a lot of restaurants, and particularly fast food, they will not accept, you have to pay in person. They will not accept payment over the phone. So that's something that I urge everyone to have a method to pay for the food and not just one card. And then, as I said, we served breakfast with the dinner meal. This is also a picture of the non-congregate site tool. And what I did, this one shows how messy my first attempt was. So this was the tab that had the Calipatria in. I copied it. And as to Sherry's point, do not do anything with that Excel spreadsheet, because everybody's using it. So I made a copy and I failed to sort it, as you can see, because it starts off with 116, then 212. So when we got to the hotel, it wasn't organized. So the next day what I did was I downloaded the information. As you can see, this looks much better. I have some key points for what you need to do so that when people take a picture of what they've served, you know the date. As you can see here, it was the Calipatria Inn. We have lunch, we have dinner, the room number, how many people were in the room. And basically feeding was the only feet on the ground. So sometimes sheltering would call me and say, is there somebody in this room? And I would check with housekeeping. Sometimes I could look, the door was open and they were cleaning. I could say they're gone. So we worked with each other on that. And what I did was I asked the hotel to print a copy for the volunteers when they came to serve lunch. And then they used it throughout the day. And this is a copy of what it looked like when they took a picture and sent it back to me. So this way it was easy to see how many people we served for lunch and how many people we served for dinner. And if you have a systemized way to do this, it'll make your life much easier. And also snack count, we control how many snacks we serve at each meal. So this made it easy to determine the total snacks for each meal. And then after they finished each meal, we would ask the person on the ground to take a picture and send it to us, and then also send us the receipts for food purchased. As I mentioned, we had all the supplies on hand, excuse me, so this went very well. So we had vehicles, we had Cambros, liners, t-shirt bags, clipboards, pens, sanitizers, wipes, gloves. We did have rolling coolers, carts, dollies. We were equipped. The key thing I want to point out is that each hotel is very different. As I mentioned, these hotels had a window that you went up to and nobody went in the lobby. So you have to be prepared, depending on the hotel, to just serve out of the vehicles if you have to, depending on what's going on. And this is a picture of our team that did the feeding. So we had to go to one hotel, unload, go to all the rooms, pack up, and go to the other hotel. This is just a picture of some of the supplies. The t-shirt bags, if you're not familiar with those, you can get those at Smart and Final or those types of stores, and they're just like the grocery bag, you know, the cheap grocery bag, but you really need those to be able to put the food in and leave it at the door. And we found rolling coolers to be really helpful, and also carts. As I mentioned, delivery to the hotel, there could be vendor delivery, ARC could pick up the food. You may have other delivery services, but do not count on the hotel staff. If we had not been out there boots on the ground, there would not have been anybody to serve all of the food. And a time saver tip, those t-shirt bags are really hard to open with gloves, so you want to maybe open some of them in advance. And another thing is to train the staff. This is something you do in advance, to fill out a 6409, because as the feeding lead, it's helpful to have a number of people working virtually with you that can do a number of the tasks. So we created a template, and then we filled in what we needed, you know, what we were going to order. And the process, it's important to know how it works. You email it to the approver, then the approver sends it to procurement. And then once we get the copy of the receipt, then we have to send the copy of the receipt and the 6409 to procurement so they can put it into the supply tracker. And it'll make everyone's, again, one of those disciplined procedures. If you do it in that way, it'll make it a lot easier. Let's see. And then have a standardized format for naming your 6409s so you can keep track of everything. If you have, it's a 6409, the date, the DR, if it was lunch, dinner, and then what meal it was. And again, that makes it much easier. And if you put it in a separate folder, the same thing with your receipts. If you have a disciplined way of keeping track of them, and you put them in one file, you can quickly sort it and see what receipts you have and what you don't have. And then for the feeding lead, we have a lot of responsibility, a lot of different tasks that we need to do, and we can certainly delegate. And I can't emphasize enough to train your staff so that they can do some of these things virtually. I have a team of 4 other people that we've been working with. We have meetings every 2 weeks. We go over how do we do 6409s? How do we do some of these different functions so that we're able to work as a team? And as Sherry showed you, she had a number of responsibilities to take care of. And so that's my quick, I wanted to leave enough time for questions. And this is a sign that somebody taped up and left on the door for us. The clients were very thankful. And I think the last day we served, it was 112 degrees in Nyland. It's very hot out there. So that concludes my presentation. Anybody have questions?
Sharon, most of the questions, go ahead.
Are we writing them or are we speaking?
Either way is fine.
Yeah.
I can't see the questions, so if you want to ask, that's fine.
I just wonder if you had a total cost of the operation. for the
I
feeding?
I did, because I had to serve so much fast food. I thought it would be a lot more expensive, but I can't remember. It was like maybe $7 average, but that included breakfast, which, I mean, that was the total. I think the total meal cost without the snacks. I have a breakdown, but off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact amount, but it was around $7.
Thank you.
I think the biggest thing is to just make sure you have agreements in place. An example would be Subway. I had called the Subways that I knew of there, and they said they couldn't do it. And I called the national catering line. They couldn't do anything. And then I was able to reach Melody after she had worked all night, and she had the name of the franchisee owner. And I got my sandwiches immediately. So that makes all the difference.
I don't see any more questions.
Okay, maybe you have more questions for sheltering then.
Hey, everybody. I have been madly trying to answer questions in the chat box.
Go ahead. I'll get off.
No, I've typed a lot of them in there, and I just posted my presentation in the chat box. I also posted a link to that Power app for the count tool, and somebody asked if they could get a copy of the non-congregate shelter client tracking tool, which really needs a shorter name, by the way. And my response to that is yes, you can absolutely have a copy of it. If you would just drop me an email, and I will send it to you that way. Okay.
Okay. Sherry, what level DR were you at? Level 2 or 3?
It was a 3.
You went it to 3. Okay. It kind of gives everybody an idea of, it seemed like a small area, but how it can go up with hotels and motels, things like that as well. And all the, now, how did you guys feel the way you work virtually? Did you find it easy, or was it difficult, or how did you feel about that?
You know, our team had that conversation because we were trying to decide if we thought it would, this was after the fact. And we didn't feel that we could have done a better job had we been on the ground. However, had this been a larger DR, or if we had had more hotel rooms at any one site, it was potentially useful to have an individual on the ground. So Jordan Hunt, you are adorable. Thank you for sharing your camera with us. I think it would have been harder to coordinate if we'd had 100 hotel rooms, for example, at a single site. So probably would have needed somebody on the ground had we gotten bigger. Yeah, Ronnie? Ronnie, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to make a comment that we need to understand that even though this was a level 3, at level 3 in COVID, this thing is a national response. So that's the difference between the old response and current situation.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So understanding that during the COVID response, and if we're using non-congregate sites like this, we're going to get to DR level much more quickly than we would in a congregate shelter because we're paying for the hotel rooms.
Right. Jordan Hunt, sir, could you please turn your camera off? I don't think, Jordan, can you hear us, sir? Jordan Hunt, can you hear us? Can you turn your camera off, please? Oh, well. I'd also like to mention that Sherry's, the chapter in San Diego was able to handle this whole operation just about. They had a few other individuals from the region that were able to help them come down and help them where they needed as well. So how many days did this last, Sherry?
Sheltering was on site for, was it 6 days, David? I want to say 6. So we started
Yeah.
on Sunday night. We were,
It
yeah,
was
I think
it
we've,
was six.
yeah, Sunday night through, a couple of us stayed on through Saturday.
And feeding went through Saturday. One of the things I forgot to mention was that the county paid for some of the rooms. And so when I went to the Calipatria, I checked with them the first day to make sure that I hadn't missed anybody that needed to be fed. And they gave me a number of people that weren't on my list. And those were actually being paid for by the county. So you might experience that. So you might want to check with the hotel when you first arrive the first day, just to make sure something hasn't changed since you printed the sheets in the morning.
Okay. If there's no other questions, or like that, let's see, we got Leanne, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, actually I do, just for our region. I'm from Central California. And you guys mentioned quite a bit for the feeding piece to get those agreements ahead of time. And I'm just wondering what your strategies are as far as asking those businesses so far, and well, I guess maybe not so far in advance, especially when those businesses aren't even sure if once we do go to a DR or even any type of TEP, whether they will be open. So would you mind sharing your strategies of how that is working for you guys?
Yes, you never know, certainly. And the longer COVID goes on, for example, we made another number of arrangements with caterers in San Diego. And as this goes on, we don't know if they'll still be in business. That's why some of the fast food places, you need to find at least a couple places that you know, chains, that type of thing, that will be in business, Subways, anything that you know you can count on for the first few meals, at least to get started. And I had advised for any of those to try to find out who the owner is, not just the manager, because you have to have the person that can make the decision and tell them to, help you. Like I said, with the Subways, I couldn't get anywhere. And then I got the name of the owner and I had 100 sandwiches in an hour and a half. So that's what makes all the difference, is the pre-preparation. And I'll be happy to talk to you about it offline if you'd like.
No, I think that's really great feedback. I appreciate it. We've had to open 2 TEPs so far, just in one county alone. So that's really great feedback, and I appreciate it. I'll take it back to our team.
Okay, guys, it's getting late, and I want to thank Sherry and her team for the presentation this evening. I think we all learned a lot. As we go forth, each time we open an event, be it a TEP or open a new DR, I think we're learning a lot during this COVID environment. So Sherry, thanks to you and your team for all the hard work you put forth at the event, as well as the presentation this evening.
You bet. And if Sharon would post her presentation in the chat, I'm sure people would like to have that as well. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm sorry we had to gallop through it so fast, but please use me as a resource, and Sharon as well. If you have any questions at all, just drop us a note, and we'll be happy to help in any way that we can.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Kirsten, do you have any closing remarks, ma'am, as far as any announcements you want to make or anything else?
Happy to make a couple of announcements. So thank you so much to the team that shared. We really appreciate you sharing the knowledge that you gained and the next steps for what you need to do with the TEP site, to running a shelter, to feeding everyone. So that's been a great addition to our knowledge. Things coming up. We have at 7 p.m. in 5 minutes in Pacific Daylight Time, RC View overview with Cliff Hugh. So I'd invite you to come and be a part of that. The link is in the meeting chat. You'll also see that I put in a link for the Pacific Division Institute, the sequel, which is an event that we are running to help people just get their training complete and be able to be ready to respond. And some people have a little bit more time, with stay-at-home orders, and so we just want to encourage people to do their training. Now, the question is, what is the password? And the password is Pacific with a capital P. And the only reason we do that is we have a lot of people from across the Red Cross that's trying to get into our events, and we want to make sure that we get our Pacific friends trained first. So taking care of our own backyard right now, and we just invite you to get signed up and be a part of that. If you have questions, we would love for you to ask them, and we'd be happy to help.
Okay, thank you. And I guess we have a good night to everybody. And those that are going to hear Cliff, please join that immediately. Goodbye.
Great, thank you. Thank you.